So now we have Marta. Marta is Director of Ecosystems at Hyperledger, Linux Foundation. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you. This works? You can hear me, I guess. Hi, everybody. I was expecting more hoodies. I mean, it's a hackathon. And then, because you're all like very nicely dressed. I guess, you know, that's what lawyers and architects bring you. So, welcome everybody. I think I have something like 20 minutes, right, for a talk, more or less. I will keep it more for the questions part, because I think that it's easier that way. How many of you know what Hyperledger is? Okay. How many of you think that it's an IBM project? Perfect. So that makes it simple. Yeah, that's me when I was blonde. I'm Director of Ecosystem, as Abel mentioned. My role is to foster the relationship with our members, to make sure that people know what Hyperledger is and know how to work with Hyperledger. So I know some technical stuff. I do have a PhD in computer science, but mostly these days I give talks and I work with our members to ensure kind of quality of collaboration between us and the public speaking. First of all, I would like to start with giving you a brief overview of what Linux Foundation is. So Linux Foundation was started 20 years ago to bring the communities together, the open source developer community and enterprises, to develop frameworks and tools under Apache license that can be used by everybody. The basic premise is, if we work together, we have a shared knowledge of experience of many companies, many geographies, many engineers, and we can build something that is much more valuable and which can then be used for business benefits in any industry. So this model started with core Linux and grew to 60 different projects, or 70 I guess now, in every major industry. Some of those projects are very famous, like Node.js. I bet most of you guys heard about Node.js, or Kubernetes, that's another project from Linux Foundation. But some of them are very low-key and not very famous, like automotive grade Linux. We also have a project in energy, LF Energy, that was recently started, and many more of those. And about 3 years ago, we started Hyperledger. It was an answer to the requests from the industry, so all of sort of enterprises that were part of Linux Foundation, to say what we want to do with, first of all, Bitcoin, but then we said Bitcoin does not really fit into that model of working together for enterprises and bringing the enterprises to use some kind of a framework or tool. So we went a level deeper and said, how about blockchain in general? And that's what Hyperledger is. It's an open source and collaborative effort to really advance the cross-industry blockchain technologies. Everything is developed under open source license. We are hosted by the Linux Foundation, and we basically cover all industries and all areas and all geographies. So just yesterday I was giving an interview, and the person who was interviewing me was had very simple set of questions that he asks all the companies, and one of them was, what is your product, and which geographies do you cover, or which industries are you targeting? So we don't have a product, and we cover all industries because we are a foundation and we are a collaboration of enterprises. So the Hyperledger vision is that there won't be one blockchain to rule them all. We believe that blockchain changes vitally how enterprises work and how can they collaborate with each other, but exactly how we do it or how this will happen is not yet clear, and I don't think it's a technology, so it won't be one single solution or one single provider who will do that. So I will not tell you that R3 will die. We actually really like R3. I don't think that Ethereum will die. We are members of Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and so is EEA our member. And I don't think that Bitcoin will die, despite the spikes in prices or drops right now in prices. So this is really everybody, there's space or slice in that cake for everybody. And we have an approach that we call a greenhouse. And bear with me, I know it's a very abstract comparison, but the way we think of it, I thought I had a slide on it, the way we think about it is that anyone can come with a seed of their idea and plant it in our greenhouse, and if the community wants to take up that and foster that seed of idea and water it and feed it and so on, it will bloom into a beautiful tree, and everyone can use the fruits of collaboration from that tree. Now, if the community doesn't think it's a great idea, well, then the plant would die, and that's also fine. So that's why we kind of grow, and we have 6 different frameworks and 6 different tools right now. These tools and frameworks are slightly different depending on the version of it. So there are many modular approach, many benefits to that modular approach. Basically, we have very flexible modification of any component. We really try to improve the interoperability between those frameworks and tools. And we really have a diverse developer community because with that modular approach, we have all sort of languages that are covered. It doesn't mean that you absolutely need to use Go when you want to code in Hyperledger on Hyperledger frameworks, or you absolutely need to use JavaScript or something like that. So this is very convenient. So that was the slide I was hoping to have. There is one project missing from here, which is Hyperledger Grid. The reason why it's missing is that it just got launched and we don't yet have a slide with Hyperledger Grid in it. But let me walk you through those things. So I bet most of you heard about Hyperledger Fabric. If you heard about Hyperledger, that's the oldest framework that we have, one with which Hyperledger started. So Hyperledger started with 30 different enterprises that joined forces, and these were your IBM, Intel, Intellect EU from startups, Blockstream as well, which is a very Bitcoin-oriented company, but they thought that it's worth contributing to us. And with 2 frameworks. So it was Hyperledger Fabric and Hyperledger Sawtooth. We now grew to Borrow, Indy, Iroha, and Grid. And we have 6 different tools and 270 members now, including Oracle and CBC. So Borrow is our one of the younger and less kind of developed frameworks, I would say. Hyperledger Borrow is Ethereum virtual machine running on top of Tendermint. So it's basically taking what is interesting and valuable from perspective of an enterprise in the Ethereum community and moving that to the kind of enterprise level, thus just using the EVM. Borrow was really great because it actually fed into both Fabric and Sawtooth, providing the Solidity smart contracts for Fabric and Sawtooth. So you can code in both of those frameworks using Solidity smart contracts if you'd like that. Hyperledger Fabric is a framework that uses Kafka as consensus mechanism. It supports all sort of very private style collaboration between enterprises. However, it comes with the other side of it, which is you really actually need to have quite a bit of trust in your system. So it's kind of, it is very much of a blockchain system, but it is still much less kind of open and ensures much requires much bigger trust in the community that or the nodes that you have compared to other blockchain frameworks. So it's kind of, if you are a set of banks and you know that there probably won't be any bad players in the system, then you'll probably use Hyperledger Fabric. But if you want to be in a system that is not as trustworthy, you might want to use other frameworks. Hyperledger Indy is our identity project. It's identity being anything, identity management, also KYC purposes, also identity of devices. So it uses zero knowledge proofs and zero knowledge proofs and distributed identifiers, right? The distributed identifiers to work in a way where you can prove things and verifiable claims as well. Prove things about yourself or the device without really revealing all the information about that entity. So it's really, really interesting, used by many governments right now, many companies as well for various identity purposes. We have Hyperledger Iroha as well. Hyperledger Iroha is a framework that is mostly focused on mobile applications. So it's very lightweight, very, very fast. You can run even the SPV proofs on the mobile devices. You can't run full nodes, obviously, but mobile devices are pretty good application for it. Also IoT. It's mostly requires C++ because they are really focused on tight memory control, and they are using a pretty cool consensus mechanism called YAC, yet another consensus, which is Byzantine fault tolerant. And then we have Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is an IoT, mostly can be mostly used for IoT, places where you need scalability and flexibility. So it uses POET, proof of elapsed time, as a consensus mechanism, and that means POET. Are you familiar with POET? No. Yeah, no. So, okay. So POET is a very simple consensus mechanism. It mimics what proof of work does. So the same finality and the same assurance of settlement without the energy consumption and time required for proof of work to be achieved. So it runs on SGX chips, so Intel SGX chips, because it requires a trusted execution environment, and you get allocated random execution time on your TE, trusted execution environment, and the entity that gets the least execution time allocated is the one that gets to put the next block into the chain. So basically it's extremely fast because it's the least amount of time, and it's very energy efficient. It also is quite secure. So that's why we say that the Sawtooth is being used in the financial industry by banks for real-time gross settlement, but mostly you'll see Sawtooth applications in supply chain and IoT, things like that. Also for media, in media area, so for IP protection. So then we have the tools. I will go through the tools. Caliper is our framework for benchmarking. So it is not there to say, okay, Hyperledger Fabric is faster than Hyperledger Sawtooth or something like that. What it is it helps you evaluate what are your numbers for your implementation of a given framework. So because there are so many aspects to a framework that you really need to take into account when you implement a thing, that you can't just objectively say this is fast or or how many transactions per second. It really depends on number of nodes. I mean, if you have 2 nodes, your transactions will be very fast. If you have 1 million nodes, they will be slower. But you need to evaluate those numbers. Then we have Hyperledger Cello, which is as a service deployment of Hyperledger Fabric. It only works with Fabric. We have Hyperledger Composer. If some of you thought that Hyperledger Composer is dying because IBM backed out, this is not true. It's like one of those urban legends that we have to work with now. Indeed, IBM decided to put all of their efforts into Hyperledger Fabric rather than Composer, but Composer has a big community. That's the advantage. That's like the flagship story for us of why open source matters. Because the main company that was contributing to it backed out, but we still have a massive community of people that want to have Hyperledger Composer and now are putting a lot of effort into development of it. So because it's open source, everybody can contribute to it, and there is no such thing as a company backed out and now the framework is dying or the tool is dying. We have Hyperledger Explorer that allows you to explore data on the blockchain. So whatever you put on there, kind of like the Bitcoin Explorer, you've seen it, those things. Hyperledger Quilt is our ledger interoperability protocol. So if you heard about the interledger protocol coming from Ripple, that's our implementation. It's in Java. It's with the same people, so same people that worked in Ripple and in W3C on the ILP, they are now contributing to Hyperledger Quilt. And Hyperledger Ursa, which is our very, very young child, which is super exciting for me. Given my security background, this was one of the biggest projects I wanted to have, which is a shared cryptographic library. So no longer do you have to implement your own security, but actually you will have modules that you can plug into your Fabric or Sawtooth deployment or whatever else to ensure the same quality, if you will. So I have a video, but I'm going to skip it because of time. I'm seeing that I'm running out of time a bit. Okay, so, but I would like to just keep it on for some questions. I don't think that I have to go through why blockchain technology, so I'm going to just quickly go through the use cases maybe. So just if you're interested in who is a member, we have a lot of members. One thing that I'll talk about quickly is that we have working groups and special interest groups. So if you want to get involved with Hyperledger and you're not feeling comfortable by just hop in and start coding, which I appreciate most of you here are probably interested in that, but we also have working groups. Working groups are spaces for the whole community. They're open to public. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to ask for permission to join those groups. You just go into our wiki, you find which group you're interested in, and you join the calls or join the mailing list, even better, because calls take up time and mailing list doesn't that much. And so start emailing then and talking to people. So we have a healthcare special interest group, we have public sector special interest group, trade finance, social impact, and we are about to launch a telecom, a special interest group, and a supply chain one. If you're interested in proposing a new special interest group because you feel like there is enough traction in the community to work on something like, I don't know, construction out of all places, or legal or whatever else, very happy to have that, talk you through the process of how you do it. Anyone can propose a group. As long as you have at least 15 people that actually want to work on a topic, you're golden. It will be a very straightforward process. So encourage you to join those groups, or even as you look through your solutions and over the next 2 days, check out those the mailing lists, because for instance healthcare working group has a lot of interesting projects going on in Hyperledger, and also the identity, performance and scalability is a group that produced a really good white paper. So there are quite a few resources that you can use throughout the next 2 days. So yeah, we have a wiki that is full of information, so highly recommend that if you are thinking of using Hyperledger soon or for the hackathon, check out the wiki and check out our webpage. I appreciate you probably don't have time to take a full course on blockchain and Hyperledger, but moving forward, if you'd like to have some training there, that's free of charge, open source, online, easy to do. We have administrator certifications, so after the next 2 days you'll be professionals in Hyperledger and you can take a certification. which is a useful thing. And then the resources page. That's exactly where you want to hit right now if you're interested in Hyperledger and learning more. We have a very good publications section with some research papers. We are kind of trying to put together a research library. So in case you wrote a research paper on Hyperledger, I will be very happy to cross-publish it on our webpage. We have some vendor directory and blockchain showcase, especially blockchain showcase is a place where you can see what people have done with Hyperledger and how they can use it. We also have something that is called Hyperledger Labs. Hyperledger Labs is a space where you can submit projects that are not full-fledged frameworks. I know that it's hard to write a whole framework within 2 days, but after the hackathon, if you want your project to continue living and being developed and you want to open it to the broader community, you can apply to put it in Hyperledger Labs. So that's kind of a way to not really put aside your hackathon project and forget about it. We feel like there is a lot of brilliance being lost after hackathons because you do a thing and then you forget it and it lives on your GitHub. So if you want other people to work on it and you want to work on it with other people, Hyperledger Labs is your space. So I think that is all. If you'll be looking for a job, we have a jobs board. Although I find that if I go to blockchain events, most people are hiring and no one wants to get jobs because there are way too many positions for way too little engineers. I guess it's a good space to be in. That's my email. I'll be here today throughout the day. I'll come tomorrow as well, of course, if you have any questions, problems. Happy to answer them. I hope I provided enough background. If you're interested in learning about use cases and what are the applications of blockchain, of Hyperledger, happy to go through that either in person or right now. So open to questions. Yep.
So we started a company called Marta, which actually deals or tries to deal with some of the problems that have been outlined. But we chose to use a permission version of Ethereum, like BIM chain that we saw earlier. And I think the reason a lot of people choose Ethereum is because of the developer tools. And having used Hyperledger, sometimes it hasn't been the most developer friendly. So I was just wondering what your view is on the respective development of the tooling around the various blockchains and whether you think Hyperledger is caught up or is better in terms of tooling?
I want to walk about because I've been standing. I absolutely agree. We are having a very hard time because we are so driven by the community and by what people want to do. They mostly want to develop things rather than document things and make other people's lives easier. So we are working on it. But as you know, Hyperledger is actually whole Hyperledger, if you want to say company or whatever team, is 10 people. And we are mostly dealing with our members and helping the community grow. So we don't have the staffing to do that. That's the sad part of being lean and non-for-profit. On the other hand, in terms of Ethereum, you have Consensus that has invested a lot and is investing a lot and has the money and resources to build the tools for the community to use it and then put it also in training and so on. That being said, this is has hugely improved over the last year. I find that people come to me and say, out of the blue, this is so easy to work with right now. We have very stable update process, so the releases are being done on a very regular basis, and we try to be very backward compatible or ensure that the community is backward compatible. Depending on which framework you use, the tooling and so on will be better or worse. So if you choose to use like raw borrow, you have to be an engineer, I will admit that. But if you want to use Set, which is Sawtooth with Ethereum, there is a big community out there and people will want to answer your questions and so on. So while we don't necessarily, we do have some tools and quite good documentation in most parts, even if you have, if that's not enough, you have the community to support you and answer the questions. Any more questions? I guess I exhausted the topic. Yeah, sure.
Do you think part of the problem is having so many different Hyperledger products, and with Ethereum it's got a fairly simple, there's many different versions, but the core Ethereum, there's a simple product with a simple roadmap. Do you think having so many different Hyperledger products could factor into why it's so difficult to create tooling and documentation?
Yeah, you could say that we are diluting our own community in a way, right? Because people that would be interested in working on Hyperledger blockchain, if we would have one, and the companies that would want to work with Hyperledger blockchain, then that would be all the developers working on this one project. But the reality is that they are very different. And so people that are investing their time in Hyperledger Indy are very different to the people that are working in Hyperledger Fabric or Hyperledger Sawtooth. So I think that as an effect, we actually are not that much diluting. There is simply, these projects exist because there are different needs and different interests from the community. And it's comparable, like Hyperledger Sawtooth is comparable to Ethereum. Hyperledger Fabric is comparable to Ethereum. It's not Hyperledger in general. What these frameworks have in common is the frameworks are a definition of the governance model, of this approach to smart contracts, the programming languages you want to use, and consensus mechanism. That's all a framework does, right? So you will have different definitions. In Ethereum, it will be, your public permissionless most of the time, or permissioned in some cases, but permissionless blockchain with the proof of stake as a consensus mechanism and something. In terms of Hyperledger Fabric, it will be your Kafka consensus mechanism with Solidity smart contracts or chain code smart contracts, so some kind of smart contracts, and Go as the main programming language, though you can code in Java and JavaScript as well. So yeah, it's an interesting problem, and we really want to solve that, but we are only 3 years old. I think that's the other part. Ethereum is a bit older as well, so had more investment and more time to grow. So the question was, what sort of examples for smart cities? Smart cities is a fairly new area for blockchain, so there hasn't been much deployment being done. There is definitely a lot of interest in manufacturing and the kind of deployments there. We have seen also very interesting, so there is Thales did a thing with Accenture and CryptoSeals, which is delivering parts, manufactured parts from the venue, the fabric, or the manufacturing house to the enterprises in very kind of, the CryptoSeals are is packaging that you can't open until, like, once you open it, it's kind of broken, and it's like Schrodinger's cat. Once you open it, you know that it has been cracked open. So that is something that has been developed. There are some implementations that I know around energy as well. So looking at how can we empower people in developing countries to build out their, it's a quite complicated process. So what they do is they bring smart meters to houses to look at how to create the energy. So there are panels, solar panels that bring the energy to the grid. And now people can buy tokens to unlock those devices that are in their houses and use the energy that the solar panels gather. And then by doing that on regular basis, they prove that they are kind of, trustworthy, because they can pay their $3 a day for energy or whatever it is. And having that over a month, 2 months, 3 months, they have provable credit score to get microloans from local banks. So these kind of ways. Yeah, but do you know of any smart city applications, Vikram?
So I've only seen conceptual smart city implementation. So one example I've seen is basically a Lego-based smart city. So someone took a whole bunch of Lego, had a lot of fun building it, windmills and everything on it. And the idea was to do supplier management, so for waste collection, things like that. You can record when waste was picked up, when the bins are full, things like that. Another example I saw was managing parking spaces as well, so putting that out onto a blockchain so that it's publicly viewable, so that the cars can pick it up as they're driving along. It can then auto-direct you to where their space is, and also for the government side to fine people who are parked incorrectly. So you automatically get fined if you park incorrectly. So I've seen those types of use cases, but they're conceptual so far.
SpaceSeti?
Yeah, that's a company that so SpaceSeti pretty much does what you've said, that's conceptual. So they have like a bolt-on product which is made out of a composite concrete, and it has pretty much I can't remember, like a node-based system in it, and it's got a 4G SIM card, so it can be retrospectively fitted to a space, and they're looking to implement it on a blockchain as well. So it's ready to go live, they've just not actually done it yet.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's something that's not...
So as Vikram was talking, I know of a company, I'm blinking on the name now, that does bin collection. And the bins can kind of inform the grid or the other nodes of if they are full or not full and how full they are and so on for planning purposes. So that's one, and another one there is usage of blockchain for parking spaces. That actually is a company that launched. That was,
Okay, I have another question because I know somebody in the audience is interested. In terms of voting on the blockchain, do you know any country implementing?
So Hyperledger has been used in several places by now. It was like everybody were asking about voting, nobody was doing it, and now we have like 7 different implementations of it. One has been done in Poland. IBM did it on Hyperledger Fabric and implemented it for voting on boards and in companies. We don't have an implementation of voting system in government yet. I don't think that we are ready for that. But the other implementation has been done by Luxoft in Switzerland. They have 2 deployments. One is in Russia, one is in Switzerland. And that's mixing Hyperledger, Indy, and Corda for voting, which is pretty cool also because it's 2 different technologies that they manage. So Indy is used for the identity part and Corda is used for reconciliation. So these are the 2 biggest implementation. I know people are working in Sri Lanka as well on a more kind of government part of that, but a voting system. About smart cities, one more thing is Dubai implemented something that is called Dubai Pay, which is a payment gateway. So now, and that's actually in production. I mean, you go to Dubai, and if you want to pay for anything, be it your tax or be it your fine, you actually go through a Hyperledger Fabric node in the background that records all of the transactions that are being done with the government, or so kind of all the money transfer between citizens and governments, and record that on the blockchain to kind of show the transparency and credibility of the government. You had a question, yeah? I can repeat your question.
Try this one.
It is.
Try this one. Hi. So with regards to use cases, do you think that there are any that we were more likely to see gain wide adoption early? What I mean by that is the reason that crypto worked for blockchain is because crypto purely exists digitally. A lot of the focus on blockchain applications tend to be supply chain management. The challenge there is you need to connect it to the physical world. But people seem to be far more excited about that. We're of the opinion that these types of implementations are going to take far, far longer until they actually scale. Digital ones, like BIM, for example, can scale far faster. Do you have any opinion on the divide between the digital world and the physical world and these types of implementations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that we are closer to the digitalization of physical assets that we think we are. Blockchain is basically an attestation mechanism in that case, right? So if you are able to create a way to uniquely identify a thing, then you can attest to its existence and its journey and so on. Now, of course, some of those things are more complicated than others. I know of things like, chemical analysis of wine and building a digital fingerprint of what the wine is so that you can track it over the time. Everledger is currently kind of doing the whole thing with digitizing the diamonds. It would be fairly easy to actually build a system that analyzes the structure of a diamond. That's what they effectively do, right? They say it has those impurities and these kind of shape and whatever, so you can actually identify that particular diamond out of all the diamonds in the world. Some of it, I think that there is a lot to be done around documents. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is kind of responsibility chain style things where because there are so many parties involved, especially like in constructing a house, right? You start with a design or a client that decides on the design and then architect drawing it out and then someone doing the calculation if the building will stand and then building it and so on. So where you have documents, that's easy to digitize. You just move to a digital world, which is fairly okay. So I think there are a lot of applications there. Interesting ones are IP protection as well. So that's again something that is already digital. In the supply chain, a lot of stuff that I'm seeing is using some kind of unique methods of stamping the thing or packaging it and so on. So ScanTrust, for instance, uses QR codes. And because a QR code or any kind of print is 60% accurate compared to the digital version, right? So you have a 40% loss. So you can create the QR codes that are unique and then put that on a blockchain, print it out, put it on a bag of coffee. That's where they do it in Rwanda and coffee packaging. And then that, if someone would take a snapshot of that and try to reprint it, it will be again 40% less, so you know that it was copied. Of course, that does not solve the problem of if someone opened the bag, poured out the coffee beans and put in something else. But that's where crypto seals and things like that come into place that use physically unclonable functions and all sort of things to prove that something was not open. And I think I'm out of time.